Okay, let's see how this goes. I was hoping we could get a few more school people here today, but looks like only 2. So, sorry about that. One of the services we offer at SELCO is borrower uploads. This is something that we can do through the system. It makes life a lot easier when we have a lot of patrons who need to get registered, and they're coming from somewhere else which already has them registered. Makes life so simple and easy. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is a bit of this. I'll do a little off slide first, and then I'll go on to this. Is we use a tool called BImport, or BImport. I'm not sure how you pronounce it, but it's spelled BImport, so that's how I remember it. And it is a utility of Horizon, which is the ability to load records from one database into Horizon itself. If you've ever heard Becky talk about mark in or mark out, it's along the same way, except instead of dealing with mark records, it deals with borrower records. So a little explanation on borrower records first. When you look at a borrower record in the system, and I am trying to stick with the term borrower record because that's how they refer to in the entire system, it is actually more than just a single field, more than just like one row of cells in an Excel spreadsheet, because borrower records can be so complicated. Now, the main key to all of these fields is the borrower number. For those of you who have been around a while, you've probably seen this in a few web reporter reports where it says borrower number and how to look it up, and then you get confused. You're like, that's not a barcode. How do I find it? And if you've paid even more attention, you'll know that when you search for borrowers, one of the indices available is the borrower number. It's a number that no one remembers. I think mine is like 1375 something. But it's the number that is the database's way of keeping track. It's the key to the borrower fields, what it's called. The key is a unique number that is assigned only to that borrower. It can't be duplicated or the entire database would break down. So borrower number is the shared key. For the most part, hopefully you won't see this because, like I said, there have been a few reports in Web Reporter. As I find them, I'm trying to get rid of them and put in barcode instead so you can actually get to the borrower record faster. So that is the shared key not only for the borrower record itself, but for all the subfields, subtables of the borrower record. And that, I've been working far too long with Horizon because I just want to go B-links, but it's blinks. Blinks in the system are something that you see like the B stats down here. This little box around here with the new and the delete and the gray drop-down. That is what's referred to as a blink. When you see one of these in the system, that actually indicates that it's a subtable. It's not part of the regular field. And there is a reason I'm explaining all of this to you as we go along. That means that multiple copies of this one can exist. That's why you can have multiple B stats on a borrower record, multiple barcodes on a borrower record, multiple addresses, because all exist in blinks. They don't exist on the borrower record itself. They exist on a subtable, which is linked through the borrower number. Okay, now, this is where it's going to get a little bit tricky. Because after explaining how the borrower record works, I'm going to go into how matching works a little bit. And then I'll get a little bit more into why I had to explain the borrower record. So, matching the records goes from one database to another, as I already explained. And you have a little bit of concept for what a key is for a field. What a key is for a record, for a table in a database. Now, when it comes to matching these records, I need some way to combine the keys between one database to the other. One restriction I'm going to put out there right away is that it is not possible to match by name or by barcode because name is just insane. It's not a controlled field. And barcode doesn't actually live on the borrower record, so I can't use it. As I said, it's in a blink, so multiple ones can exist. It's not a key. The field must be unique in Horizon. That's the other reason why name doesn't work. If the person has 2 records, which is totally allowable with a public and a school record, it is not a unique field. So this field that is filled out in the record needs to be utterly unique. No one else has that field fill out that way in the system. The one weird thing about this is that the field doesn't have to have a rule requiring that. If any of you have played around with the student ID field, it isn't a unique field. You can have multiple copies of that field, which really screws things up sometimes. That said, student IDs are usually an excellent match because they are coming from the database at the school, and that's generally the key to a school's student management database, is that's how they're stored, is through the student ID. I can also manipulate the data inside of Horizon so that it does become unique. So for our schools, like Stewartville schools, they only use 4 digits for their student ID numbers, and several other schools do as well. That would cause issues because that wouldn't be unique. However, I've worked with these districts and set it up so that when Stewartville schools puts in a student ID record, they always prefix it with ST. No one else does that. That way I get a unique field for them. So I'm trying to do that to get student IDs working. Another wonderful option are MARS numbers. If you've ever worked in education in Minnesota, you know that this, or at least in the last decade or so, this is the number set up by the Department of Education for students. It is unique throughout the entire state, so we don't have to worry about that. I love MARS numbers. It's difficult to add them sometimes because a lot of times you don't get them when the student comes in ad hoc to add a record. Now, the other important thing when it comes to matching, which is why I went into the tables, is that when I match these things from the database sent to me into Horizon, if I don't touch a table, it is unaltered. This is how I am able to go in and not only create new student records for our school libraries, but I can update their existing ones by changing the grade, the graduation year, homeroom, things like that, without touching the barcode subtable. So that way they keep their student barcode at the same time. We don't have to worry about that. Okay, when it comes to the setup work for this process, and this service is something that is available to all of our schools, it is a basic service, means there's no additional fee for it, because I would much rather spend 3 hours of my time setting this up for you and then an hour every year running it than you spending a week updating all your borrower records. But this is a basic service, but there is some setup required the first time we do this. As I said, we need the key field from the student management database. I need to know what you're going to do to match. Most of the time is the student ID from that database. Stewartville Schools is an exception. They use their lunch number. Whatever, it works. It's a unique number. So what I need to have done is, what needs to get done before we can do this is we need to update the records which already exist in Horizon. Because 9 times out of 10, they haven't been putting in that unique field into the database. But I need it in there, otherwise when I try to match it against one database to the other, it's going to tell me there's no match, and it's just going to create a second record of the student record. So there'll be 2 in there. So the setup requires that staff goes in and adds in that field the first time. And then I also need to know what additional fields you're going to have in the record. There are obviously some mandatory fields which every record needs to have. Location, simple enough. B-type, usually simple enough. Break it down by grade. Need graduation year for student records. And name, obviously. I feel like I'm forgetting one more. But anyway, you all know how borrower records work, or hopefully you. But I also need to know what additional fields you're going to be putting into the borrower record. I have Rochester Public Schools. They add in multiple B stats, which are beyond the necessary ones. They include the sex B stat and the race B stats, as well as graduation year and B type, so they can track how their library is being used along those divides when they do their reports. I have other ones that give me all their student emails, and they want to be set up for email notices with pre-overdues. And I can do that through this import process, or at least create the records for them. They still need to run the notices or have us run them to get that done, but I can create the records that way. Phone numbers, same way, addresses, all that stuff. I even have one library that assigns barcodes in their student management database and then sends it to me. And I can create barcodes, I just can't match off of them. Okay, and then after that, I just need a file of student information sent to me from just an export from their database to match up against mine. It's usually an Excel file. That works perfectly fine. A CSV file even once did it off of just a text file. That was hard, but it's possible. So it's fairly simple, just an export from the database. You see, blanked out some borrower information here, is that the fields needed, again, the name, the key field, either the graduation year or the grade, and any other information desired. So they just sent me a copy of their database in an Excel spreadsheet, and I just map this over. I go through and I have a bunch of formulas set up to change things around. Like I combine the first and last name and capitalize them, uppercase them, whatever, and put that in there. For Stewartville schools here, I transform the lunch number to include ST at the beginning so it matches up. So it's just a bunch of clerical work on my end. Takes me half an hour usually. I have documentation down for all the schools on how to do this. And then all I do is run the BImport tool off of this and a header file. And it takes about 1 minute for 1,000 records to be processed into the system. The continuation work on this one is all you really need to do after this has been set up the first time is just send me an export of your database every year, and I'll update it. Like I said, half hour for me to do the clerical work of matching the columns, and I have documentation on how to do it for the ones who've already set it up. And then I just do it, and it updates minute per 1,000 records. The one other thing that you would need to do if you sign up for this service is that if you do have anyone who comes in mid-year, in that one case, you need to go in and add in the student ID or whatever other key field you're using. That way I can match up against it for the next year. Any incoming students in the annual load, you don't need to worry about that. Since they don't exist in the database, I'm perfectly fine just creating them with their own key field when I do the changes for everyone else. This is, like I said, mostly used for schools. I have used it for the publics once or twice. I know we had one public library ask us to modify all of the names on their borrower records. Anyone who had parentheses, EM parentheses, they wanted that removed from it. And there is no easy way to do that in batch inside of the system, so I had to export all of their borrowers who had that, transform them in Excel, and then re-upload them. It's kind of a fun experiment. But that's what I have for the BImport tool. Hopefully some school people will be watching this recording and take advantage of this service because I really like it and I think it's really useful. Do you have any questions from anyone who's here, or are you just all like glazed over at this moment?